Draw 3 cards or force opponents to draw 3 cards. Completely unhinged card design, the likes of which we'll probably never see again. All of the unorthodox grammar and garrulousness we've come to know and love from alpha templating. The missing article in front of opponents be damned, this is a brilliant exercise in gratuitousness. The option to draw 3 cards for 1 mana was apparently not good enough for Blue's entry into the boon cycle.
Please, sir, I want some more.
So water mages are given the option to force an opponent. The phrase target player in modern templating did for this rather intense phrasing, alas, to draw 3 cards. An edge case, sure, but also evidence that the game's designers, from the ground floor, gave some consideration to less obvious ways to use cards and alternate win conditions. I've never experienced it myself, but there must be a certain satisfaction to foisting a draw 3 onto an opponent for the win. Designed at a time when the power of card advantage was not fully understood, Ancestral Recall, somewhat unintentionally, is a card that brooks absolutely no subtlety. The power level is through the roof, the artwork is as in your face as it's possible to get, and the advantage a player gets from resolving it is enormous. We can see a curious parallel with Ancestral Recall in Healing Salve, at the other end of the power spectrum of the boon cycle, but the only other card to have an alternate mode. Gain 3 life, or prevents 3 damage from being dealt somewhere. At a time when card was treated as being worth the same as life points, underneath the modern foundations of card advantage and board presence, there's a depth to the design of these cards. Breadcrumb trail for players to use them in unconventional ways, even if most of the time you're just going to cash in your recall for 3 sweet cards at the low price of 1 mana. The flavor of Ancestral Recall is equally fascinating. Does this epically powerful rush of knowledge come from a eureka moment? No, that's actually in green and an absolute crime against the color pie. Or from a kind of augury, prediction of the future. Hell no, it comes from this bearded warrior king having memories of his ancestors. There is a bit of tension between the artwork and the card name, I think. Recall is modeled after the French and Latin verbs which use the re prefix. It is the fancy, restrained way of saying remember, but the dude in the artwork is, without knowing the technical term, freaking out. Maybe he's accidentally chowed down on a Madeline, and the Ancestral Recall is an involuntary one. Gamma playtest version of the card was indeed named Ancestral Memory, its stand-in artwork showing a gaggle of presumably related faces. This definitely feels more static than the absolute rush of the recall depicted in the artwork. Mechanics, name, and artwork combine brilliantly here. Aside from the recaller, the most prominent part of the artwork is the temple in the background, which, and you'll have to bear with my abysmal architectural history here, looks like a Mayan one, maybe the temple of Kukulchan or El Castillo at Chichen Itza. Mayan civilization spans back to around 2000 BC, with the temple of Kukulchan apparently being built between the 8th and 12th centuries AD. The distance of the historical reference nicely complements the power level of the spell, as it's understood now. It feels like you're channeling ancient, arcane knowledge, the same way contemporary players channel this most pure, tripartite card draw spell when we bust out a divination to hit our 4th land drop. One thing I personally didn't realize is the white aura around the head of the central figure, let's call him the recaller, which indicates that the rest of the artwork is what's being recalled. We see a temple bustling with life, 2 people climbing to the top with another to welcome them there, and then in the foreground, 2 more figures passing by on the road in front. Mayan civilization, like so many, was brutally destroyed by European colonialists, but it's recalled here, perhaps as the enormity of suffering, or just life that causes the bizarre, monk-inspired expression on the recaller. I have no idea from what time period or culture the recaller comes from. There seems to be a bit of debate as to whether he constitutes a full personage, given that the first set, Alpha, was made before any of the lore was established. I think Mark Poole has given him just enough charisma and detail that players can mold him into a character should they so choose, but I find it hard to say anything about his design. The helmet makes him look like a one-and-done villain from the Shatner-era Star Trek. But hey, it's still recognizable enough to represent this card on Oracle of the Alpha. The original version of Ancestral Recall has lingered long in the memory, informing pretty much every new version of the card that's been printed. The 2005 Vintage Championship promo shows an alternate rendering of the Recaller, snapped out of the shock of his recollection and harnessing the power of his ghostly ancestors. There are versions of the original pyramid in the background. We can perhaps take this as being the scene following the original artwork. The Recaller feels the weight of knowledge and the cognizances of his ancestors overcome him, and indulges in a ritual designed to harness this power to his own ends.
A windmill will kill many bald eagles.
Or for the greater good. I don't know. He looks pretty villainy. Look at that crown. A la lanterne. Ryan Pancoast's version of the card, originally designed for the prize card for the 2013 Vintage Championship, went on to be used for the Vintage Masters set for Magic Online, as well as other versions of the card, like the one summoned by Oracle of the Alpha on Arena. So it's probably the best known artwork outside of the original. There's an interview with Pancoast on YouTube where he's asked about the commission, which mainly covers the context in which the artwork was created. The figure who's experiencing the Ancestral Recall is very clearly standing on the shoulders of giants, as I imagine Pancoast is thinking of himself as doing. The giant statues definitely seem to be kin to the original Recaller, but the figure climbing the stairs is someone new, happening upon this ancient monument and feeling its overwhelming power, like a reality TV celebrity using Ancestry.com on Who Do You Think You Are? A wonderful tribute to the original, whose wide use stopped me from properly appreciating it until I came to write this. Fast forward to the 2018 Vintage Championship, and we have a card that seems to call back to Pancoast's version as much as Pancoast's calls back to the original. Raul Vitale's figure experiencing the recall seems to be a different person, but they carry the same crescent-ended staff with them.
I'm seeing double here.
And the giant stone statues are present still, but here the figure seems to be basking in the weird blue lights they're emitting. There's an uncanniness to their designs, almost resembling sarcophagi, which gently hints at the overwhelming power of the knowledge the central figure is acquiring, perhaps too much for mortal minds. Most recently, the quietest and subtlest Ancestral Recall was created by Volkan Barga for the 2022 Vintage Championship. A fastidious scholar, laden with books, receives a helping hand from a very Victorian-looking ghost. Maybe they're continuing their ancestors' research, or maybe the ancestor is helping them with a proof or theory they struggled with. This is a far cry from the elaborate ritual of the 2018 version, or the overwhelming rush of knowledge in the original, but sometimes the most profound bits of knowledge visit us in our quietest moments, when we're frustrated in our shanty library with its cobbled-together staircases, or poring over random footnotes in a book. Understanding Ancestral Recall's power involves understanding the power of card advantage, something which continues to confound many an EDH player today. This Reddit thread reads like the Arsenal supporters arguing if one of their transfer targets is 28 or 29, or the bodybuilders from back in the day wondering how many times a week every other day meant.
Turn that off.
Part of the issue here is the obsession with deck building templates in EDH, but still, the fixation on hard definitions alongside a complete lack of understanding of what card advantage is absolutely epic over 30 years and God knows how much analysis later. Ancestral Recall is pretty much unfettered card advantage. You invest a small amount of mana and the card Ancestral Recall, and you get your 3 cards back, so you've gained 2 cards overall. The riffs and variations on this pure card advantage are what have befuddled our poor editors, with a huge amount of ink spilt over whether Brainstorm is card advantage, card draw, or both. It's better to look at something like Divination, which is Ancestral Recall watered down until you can barely taste anything. You invest 3 times as much mana, and get 2 cards back, so you've gained 1 card. Scant reward on the face of it.
I receive friendly coloring candy.
but in the limited environment you're hopefully casting your divination in, it can help you to find that vital 5th land, dig you closer to your bomb or removal spell, and just generally keep the wheels of your deck spinning. One of my favorite developments of recent sets is the way card draw spells have been powered up, presumably to justify their inclusion alongside the increasingly potent onboard synergies and lack of unplayable cards in modern day sets. Instant speed divination and 3-mana dig through time throw divination firmly into the shade, pimped out gold microscope or nay. There are untold card draw spells in blue, of course, but Ancestral Recall has a few direct descendants. The most prominent is probably Brainstorm, first printed in 1995's Ice Age and many more times since. I love the flavor and specifically the naming of Brainstorm. Whilst clearly being descended from Ancestral Recall, the 3-card burst of knowledge or new ideas followed by 2 of them going straight back on top of your library is a very mimetic way of depicting the mental activity we'd call a brainstorm. The artwork is also a bit of a brainstorm or mindfuck, as we're confronted head-on by a face which appears to be fairly innocuous, but gets more uncanny the more you look at it, with a prematurely aged forehead from all of that frontal lobe flexing, blown out eyes with light emanating from the sockets, and a mouth that's been photo-negatived. I really think this is one of Christopher Rush's best magic artworks. His way with smoky blues and purples and skill in depicting ambiguous facial expressions are especially effective here. In this admittedly low-skilled player's estimation, it's a card draw spell with an extremely high skill ceiling. There are the obvious applications like digging through your top 3 cards if you haven't made an early land drop, or using shuffle effects to get rid of redundant cards and making sure you draw fresh ones. But the sheer wealth of options for the player and the possibilities for what the state of play will be after your brainstorm resolves are so vast, it's difficult to make the optimum play each time. And that was before every Hasbro stock owner's favorite card came along. I'm not sure this effect was intended, but Orcish Bowmasters really brought the hammer down on profligate brainstorming. Playing 1v1 against a deck that is constantly brainstorming is quite a frustrating experience, and anything which can put the fear of God or Sauron or whoever into serial brainstormers gets a thumbs up in my book.
Your thoughts ain't my thoughts. Bitch, I'm flowing straight from the survival scroll. Cut that bitch off!
Reading a painstakingly written primer to Core Gates on the bus to a pauper event a year or so back, I came across the line, "The best brainstorm is the one you never cast," and I momentarily felt like I was reading the Tao Te Ching of Magic the Gathering. Ancestral Vision from 2006's Time Spiral uses its mechanics, artwork, and a callback to the original card to tell quite the story. Time Spiral is known for its sometimes over-intricate references to cards from Magic's past, but in the instance of Ancestral Vision, the time-traveling shtick is layered on top of a card that already dealt with the span of time across generations.
Someone once told me time is a flat circle.
Mark Poole returns and riffs on the temple depicted in Ancestral Recall, but here there's a blue wash effect indicating the past, when the temple was first built, with the present day, or maybe the future vision of the temple showing the ravages of time. John Avon's updated version of the card goes the other way, with a temporal magnifying glass showing the future state of presumably the same settlement as the one in Poole's cards. Time has certainly been kind to the settlement, and there is a kind of ornate grandeur to the buildings inside the magnifying glass. I wonder if time will be as generous now that all new buildings are judged by the metric of how well they can grift consumers out of their money. I don't necessarily enjoy these fixed versions of classic effects as a rule, since it feels like the designers are drawing from an increasingly dry well, and in so doing are also presenting players with a fundamentally watered down experience compared to the originals. But the suspend mechanic is used brilliantly here. It's a bit of a shame that the reminder text for suspend is displayed, because the 2 lines of text would have been a nice homage to the raw simplicity of Ancestral Recall.
Oh, yeah.
Still, this is very much a pet card of mine, and you'd best believe it's getting jammed into any EDH deck I build that vaguely cares about card draw. Visions of Beyond is the Ancestral Recall adjacent payoff you get for playing a mill deck and getting to the mid-game. That's kind of it. Obviously a 1-mana cantrip at instant speed is a long way below rates, So you need to be milling someone pretty hard before this becomes viable.
What is the charge? Eating a meal? A succulent Chinese meal?
In terms of telling the story of the development of knowledge and what one mind can contribute to that development though, I'd argue that the card is above rates. Look at that flavor text. The past is the foundation for all that exists in the present. We merely reconstruct what our ancestors have already discovered. Sashemir, Sage of Memories. Completely illogical, of course, but full credit for having the temerity to fit a theory of epistemology into the flavor text of a magic card. For me, it doesn't quite link up with the visions of beyond in the title. Beyond here just seems to mean before. The figure in the artwork is looking backwards too, although maybe the dragon patterns in the clouds indicate something more than the past. To really go beyond, we need to look at Peach Momoko's secret lair. Her visions of Beyond depicts a female character who has definitely visited the Beyond and is apparently still there, in part. The flavor text is a reference to Nietzsche's abyss gazing back at its gazer. They probably could have just used the original quotes, and the art does a brilliant job of depicting the Beyond via trinkets and physical change. Definitely not the way I would try to depict Beyond, but there aren't any secret lair commissions coming my way.
Everybody refuses to call Sean Hannity. Nobody calls Sean Hannity. If somebody would call up Sean Hannity, well, he's willing to say it, but nobody wants to call him.
There isn't much abyss watching in MTG's flavor, and I'd personally love to see more of it if the universe's Beyond deniers are okay with that. In my other videos, I've attempted to yoke the flavor of the cards being discussed to their real-world origins or applications. I can't see an elegant way to do this with Ancestral Recall.
I get this right as block, it comes as quite a shock.
I actually think its flavor fits the best of any of the cards I've covered, probably because it's so unorthodox.
Not orthodox, I don't live by the rules.
It's not a bolt of electricity that can zap stuff, or a magic trinket, or a means to turn war into peace. It's the unpredictable and occasionally massively potent activity of a single human mind. It's history and future. It's the Uno meme before the Uno meme. I don't remember the rest.